Hello and welcome to SUFCtv live on this Sunday evening. The conditions out there aren't great at the moment whilst we're in lockdown, but I have two very special guests for you. I've got father and son, Martin and Jamie Copus. And Martin is a director of the club. He's been a director of the club since February 2018, and his son Jamie is a rower. He's represented Great Britain on multiple occasions, so going to get some great stories. And again, it'd be great to cover a different sport actually uh, live on SUFCtv as well. Also, make sure to get involved in the live chat as well. I want your thoughts or comments and some questions for Martin and Jamie. I'm going to be interviewing Martin first as well, and then Jamie after. So, firstly, for the pair of you, welcome to SUFCtv. Just actually a quick question, both of you. How are you guys coping in the lockdown at the moment?
I think remarkably well. I mean, he's training out the wazoo. Now, he'll tell you more about that later on. But we're lucky enough to live out in Oxfordshire. So we live just outside Wallingford. So there's lots of opportunities for cycling and getting out and about, walking. And because there aren't so many people around, you don't really get the same sense of lockdown as if we were in London, is my guess.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think there's, that you just kind of feel there's a little bit more, mental freedom. I think, so you don't feel quite as like you got to stay inside, in the same way. But yeah, no, it's been all right. I think you can either make yourself a kind of a victim out of it, if you know what I mean, or you can just
Yeah.
crack on. I think in the past this country's done pretty well at just cracking on and getting on with it. So yeah, no, it's going okay. Yeah, no, just it will end, and I think we're certainly over. I would like to think we're over the hump of it all now, and yeah, with any luck, we've certainly spent more time inside than we've got ahead of us. So.
Good stuff,
Yeah.
good stuff. So firstly, before I get into uh, your uh, your links with Sutton, Martin, I want to go through sort of your uh, early career. So I'm just looking at firstly from 1986 to 1981, you were a managing director at Leo Burnett at Singapore. So can you elaborate on that a bit more, please?
Yeah. Well, I joined Leo, but Leo Burnett's one of the bigger advertising agencies in the world. And I'd done a postgraduate teaching certificate. And I taught in a school, and I thought, you know what, I can't quite see myself doing this for the next X T years. And what am I going to do? And as you'll hear later, I grew up in the outskirts. I was born in Sutton, but I grew up in the outskirts of Manchester. And I had a summer job in a company that called itself advertising, but in fact, what it did was it made for sale signs, and they printed leaflets for houses and flats that were for sale and stuff. And that's where the word advertising came from. And when I decided I wasn't going to be a teacher, um, this word advertising sprung up, and I applied to a number of agencies, absolutely off the cuff. Didn't really know anything about the industry, totally flying by the seat of my pants. And if I look back at the list of agencies that I applied to, I mean, there's only one I would have applied to, and that was Leo Burnett. And I got lucky, got offered that job, and moved to London. And really, that kicked off an international career. Um, the reason being that neither of my first accounts were in England, so to speak. One was in Scotland, which is Scottish and Newcastle breweries, and the other, dare I say it, was cigarettes, which was all based in Switzerland. So I think I must have had an image problem back there, being put onto cigarettes and beer. But anyway, um, if it that started off an international career, as I say. So um, London was somewhere like 3 or 4 years. Then my wife and I, just before we got married, moved to Egypt. We were in Egypt for 2 years, then Hong Kong, then Singapore. And so by the time we got to Singapore, we were best part of 6 years out of the UK, something like that. And we had a whale of a time. I learned to ride horses before I was going to work. Leo Burnett was at the time the third or fourth biggest agency in Singapore. We won the McDonald's business, which was the single biggest piece of business there. What's interesting about McDonald's is if you're in an advertising agency and you work on their business, they insist that you have some experience in one of their stores. So I remember one Sunday, um, we'd been out on a boat that some friends had, and they dropped me off at the far end of Singapore in a place called Punggol, and I was supposed to be on duty in the Punggol McDonald's, and so I got off the boat and sort of ran in, and first job was griddling McChickens, I think, and then I progressed in the same day to be on the till. And I'll always remember, a lady comes up, very lovely old Chinese lady, and she wanted a fillet of fish, and we hadn't got any, but they were just in process. So I said, I'll bring them out to you, don't worry. So in 5 minutes later, the fillet of fish were ready. So I'm not supposed to be a McDonald's ad, by the way. So I made up the tray, took it round to her, and she said, "Oh yeah, thank you, sir. I think she got it the wrong way round. She's the customer." But yeah, we had 5 very happy years in Singapore. Jamie's older brother Rory, who has also been seriously into rowing, is seriously into rowing. He's a coach now and was a Copus. And he was born there about, well, no, exactly 3 months before we got posted to the States. And we then went to live in Chicago where Jamie was born. So he's a dual citizen, US and GB. So
what?
In Singapore.
Also, continue.
No. So that was a story about Singapore. That's how we came to be there. So we were on a global tour in a way. The amount of time we were with, I was with Leah Burnett in the end, straight out of college, for just short of 20 years. Very, very unusual in the advertising industry where people move very frequently. But they always looked after my wife and myself on our travels. Interestingly, they probably offered me as many opportunities to move within the company as the ones I accepted. But that was never held against you. I remember we arrived in Hong Kong, and I don't think you know this, and we'd only been there 6 months, and my boss said, "We'd like you to be the deputy managing director in Tokyo."
Oh, I think I do remember.
Yeah. And I said, "Well, we've only just arrived." And he said, "Well, you tick all the boxes. I've got to offer it to you. Go and have a look at it. And if it's not right for you, then that's okay." So we went and looked at it. Fabulous job, fabulous place. Love the food, love the culture. But it was just the wrong time. We'd only just uprooted out of Egypt. And to move again after 6 months, it was just too soon. Plus, and you were saying this just last night, I mean, Hong Kong's the most electric place on the planet. And to move out of that vibe so soon after arriving would have been a great shame.
So obviously you had, as you mentioned, your time with Leah Burnett in Singapore and the USA. So for a period of 1999 to 2005, so you were the obviously managing partner of Copus and Co. You were with Huntsworth PLC from 2001 to 2003, and 2003 2005 you were a managing director UK with 12 Snaps. So can you sort of talk me through that period of time?
Yeah. The time of Copus and Co. was when I was consulting. So I came out of advertising for big agencies, and it was really time to do something for myself. And almost everything this is the time of the dot-com boom. And this was so working for myself was really a good idea at that time. And in fact, one of the guys who'd worked for me in Chicago was then working for Anderson Consulting, what is now Accenture. And they had in Boston, and that's Boston, Massachusetts, not Boston Links, a dot-com launch center, and which was kind of an accelerator. And they were putting together a virtual team to work on something, I don't think you know this, called iFlourish. And it was kind of a lifestyle.com. And basically, on a Monday morning, the team would appear in Boston from all over the States, and I was flying transatlantic and would work like crazy out of hotels and then disappear back home on a Friday night. I mean, crazy way of working. But that was the first incubated .com within Accenture, within Anderson Consulting's .com launch center. And there were a number of similar assignments. I mean, QR codes are now pretty. I think most people on this call will be pretty familiar with QR codes. I mean, I worked with one company in the very early days of them who were installing QR code readers in phones in Japan, which is where it all kicked off. And then for another company in Florida who had the intellectual property rights to the connections that you make through QR codes. So without getting too deeply into it, a lot of what I was doing in those days was mobile. And mobile technology, even though I'm not a mobile technologist. But we'll talk later about MBuzz and the company I now work for, and as you know, run the sports side of the business. MBuzz themselves are a telco services company. So that experience from back then running my own consultancy is really quite useful right now in terms of understanding what our core business does.
So yeah, sort of that period of 2001 to 2005 with being Huntsworth and 12 Snap. How did you find that?
Oh, right. So, yes, I didn't answer you. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So, Huntsworth was a re-engineering job. They were a listed company, and they had many different agencies within their business. And my job was really to look at each of those businesses and re-engineer it for growth. So that's what we did. The 12Snap, as it was called, was one of the earliest mobile marketing companies. So they had business in 3 or 4 different countries, and my job in London was to do the early stages of marketing through mobile phones. So one thing we did, I'll always remember this, we did a huge, remember Text to Win? We did a huge Text to Win program on Walker's Crisps.
Okay.
I remember that. And Walker, I mean, and they printed codes on 2 billion packs. I'm sure this is all in the public domain. I hope so. And so we, on the day of the launch, I wanted the kids, because at this time Jamie and his brother were kids. We wanted them to test the codes. It's basically follow the instructions, text it in, and so on. The problem was that they'd been printed by the client, and an N looked like an H, and an H looked like the K. So suddenly, at like 7:30 in the morning, there was a major problem. And one of the things that I always try to do in business is to think outside of the box. And the issue was therefore how to fix in the computer that it could replace or read an N, an H, or a K, whichever came in, it was okay in that slot in the code that was being sent in, and we managed to do it on the fly. So no packs of Walkers were retrieved, and the day was saved one way or another, not by myself, but by the technologists who were able to do that. But it was those sort of programs that we did it with 12Snap. And as I say, it was the very early days of using, the ubiquitous mobile phone as we now have for marketing purposes. Exciting times. And that was a company that was based in Munich. My degree is in German and French, very similar to AB. I was listening to AB's Epic a couple of nights ago. I have to say, I haven't quite got through it, with apologies to AB. I think I'm 20 minutes from the end. But certainly AB and I share a background in that way. We both have a degree in modern languages, and me working for a German company at that time really suited me. And yeah, exciting times. I mean, we were really at the cutting edge of what you could do with a mobile phone in those days.
After that, you were involved with Neo Media Technologies as the chief operating officer. Can you just talk about sort of more what you did with them?
Yeah, well, that was QR Codes again. That was the company who had the intellectual property rights, as it's called. They basically had some patents that went back, I don't know, 15 years. And if you could interpret them one way, which was a correct way, by the way, then they had the rights to every connection that you would make from your phone scanning a QR code. The problem was that the genie was out of the bottle, if you like. The QR codes were already fairly well established around the world, and so to sort of after the event start to try and legally impose a patent was virtually impossible. So what we did was to build up our own code reader and our own marketing for how to use QR codes, and that was fairly successful. It was tricky though, because I was back living in the States again, in Florida, and the family were all over here in the UK, and we looked very, very closely at relocating back to the States again. We almost moved back, and the issue then was Jamie and Rory were then, I think you were already at Abingdon, right?
I'd just gone, I think, yeah.
I mean, we found the ideal school for them. My wife and I met through hockey. We both played serious hockey. These two were both into hockey, but increasingly they were getting into rowing. And to uproot the family just didn't make any sense at that time. So we refocused back on the UK, and I'm glad we did.
So yeah, it says it from 2007 to December 2012. Again, managing partner with Copus and Co. So that involved digital marketing and management worldwide. So obviously relocating to UK. Can you just talk me again more to do with that?
Yeah, Tom. I mean, I basically collapsed two sections of Copus and Co together. But when we decided that I wasn't going to be, or we weren't going to relocate the family to Florida, I was then in basically commuting transatlantic every 2 weeks. I think I was back every other weekend, which when we compare my job now, I mean, that was mild by comparison. But nevertheless, in those days, we didn't have the sort of communication that we're talking on here. So you really felt the distance, and you really felt the time away.
FaceTime changed that, didn't it?
Yeah, FaceTime completely changed that, and Skype that we're talking on now. So I collapsed those two things. But Florida was great, but it just wasn't really the right thing for the family. So I reestablished Copus and Co, and then that led to a number of other good things.
Yeah, so I'm going to go on to that actually. So something that really stands out to me is Sports Revolution Arabia. So you had a 4-year period there, which involved you being executive director and then chief executive. So can you? That sounds very interesting. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, sure. So I described that time as when my weekdays met my weekends. Or rather the other way around, because the family, as I say, everybody plays sport, everybody's played serious sport, and so the weekends were entirely, and still are, consumed around sport. And I met a gentleman. This is through the whole QR code business. I met a gentleman through a New York company who was a Brit, and he was actually one of the leading names in the advertising industry. There's a guy called Chris Ingram, lovely, lovely man. He'd been a serious athlete in his day, as in track and field. And Chris was the first guy to take, those of you who have any understanding of the advertising business, he was the first guy to take media planning and buying out of an advertising agency that did everything, from the planning through to the creative work, et cetera, research, et cetera, et cetera. And Chris had done very well. He'd set up his own company called the Media Department, then Chris Ingram Associates, et cetera, and he'd sold that. And he was investing in sport, he was investing in media, and he was investing in technology. And that's how he'd gotten into a code business in New York. And they introduced us. Turned out Chris was the chairman of Woking Football Club. And lovely, lovely fella. And he said to me, look, I've also got a significant interest in this sports company in London called Sports Revolution. You're a sports person. Why don't you come into that and bring your knowledge of digital media, and we'll see how high is up for that side of the business. So that's what I did. So I went into Sports Revolution. had a couple of great years there. And then, if you remember, my wife and I first left the UK for Egypt. So I knew somewhat about the Middle East. Started talking to Chris and the other management about setting up Sports Revolution Arabia in Dubai, which we then did as a joint venture with, guess who, Mbuzz. So I then started commuting between here and Dubai, and things started to take off. So we started off in pure advertising, really, pitch side advertising. You know, the LED signs that run increasingly creative stuff around the edge of the field, and then from there we developed into sponsorships. But along the way, I was sitting in Dubai, and I got a call from one of the colleagues, lovely man called Andy Clilford. And Andy said to me, Sheffield United are in the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley. I said, yes, I know that. And he said, what about you trying to find a shirt sponsor for that one game over in the Middle East? I said, close. Well, there's two problems with that. One is they've already got a shirt sponsor, and two, the game's about 8 days away. So he said, yeah, but the shirt sponsorship that they have is sort of internal within the club more than external, and they think they can make some money out of this. What do you think? So I said, well, time is very short. Let me have a think about it. So I put the phone down, and then I remembered that at that time, Sheffield United was 50% owned by Prince Abdullah bin Saud, the Saudi prince. And therefore, a Saudi company might well be interested in being shirt sponsor for that game. So I called Mbuzz and said, look, time is very short. Is there any way that the company itself would like to take the shirt at Wembley? There'll be 70, 80,000 people there. It'll be beamed all around the world. So Nawaf, who's our chairman, called me back about 10 minutes later and said, I was reminded of the words he said. He said, Martin, we will do this. And so they did. If you go onto our website and onto the YouTube channel, you'll see a video of it. And we got about, I don't know, 9 minutes of close-ups of the brand. I mean, it was right on the chest. It was a fabulous game. Nawaf and Yusuf weren't able to come over. My wife and I went to the game. My wife's not the biggest football fan. She was leaping in the air every time Sheffield United scored, and because then they were in League One playing against Hull, who were in the Premiership. So it was a big game. If I remember rightly, I should know exactly, but I think it was 3-2 down. But they had a heck of a game. And if you Googled, as I did, Mbuzz before that game, there's a number of companies called Mbuzz around the world. And you couldn't find Mbuzz in Saudi Arabia. After the game, you Google Mbuzz, and it's like the first 7 pages. So from a marketing point of view, I mean, it was an incredible thing to do. I mean, very few people would think that sponsoring a football shirt would be, it's obviously important, but could make that much of a difference based on one game. But it did. And that was really the first step into sport for Mbuzz, and that piqued everybody's interest, saying, why don't we extend out into sport and create something called Mbuzz Sport? And then that's what happened. Yeah, we can talk a lot more about Mbuzz Sport. But.
So also, you were head of Marcom and sponsorship with Abdul Latif Jamil. A few things stand out to me that they were associated with Toyota, and also they were associated with the Saudi Pro League since 2013. So can you talk to me about that?
Yeah. So here I am in Dubai, and the phone rings, and it's a lady from a company called Heidrick and Struggles, who are one of the big global headhunting firms. And in fact, they were the company who years before had brought me out of Lebanon. Brought me out of Lebanon. And lovely lady called Nina Panesar. Nina said, do you know anybody who might fit this profile? And she sent me the job specification, and I read it, and I thought, yeah, I fit this.
Yeah, me.
I fit this profile. Now, of course, at this stage, I'm running this new joint venture that we set up. It wasn't quite so new. I think I've been doing that for 2 years. Anyway, what the job was running the title sponsorship of the Football League in Saudi Arabia. Now, anybody on this call would think, okay, well, that's kind of interesting, but how big a deal is that? But in fact, at the time, I can't share the numbers, but it was the second most expensive title sponsorship of a football league in the world. There are big crowds for football in Saudi Arabia. It's proper football, proper fans, scarves, the whole thing. And it was the second highest value, let's call it, sponsorship in the world after Barclays at the time. And my job was to turn that into the best value we possibly could. The league had been already renamed as the Abdul Latif Jameel League, which is a bit of a mouthful, and so we renamed it Dowry Jameel, which just means Jameel League. But what's also interesting about the family name, Abdul Latif Jameel was the founder of the company. Jameel is the family name, but in Arabic it means beautiful. So the league became Dowry Jameel, which is the Jameel League, but it also means beautiful league and beautiful game, and that seemed to stick. So, in fact, that's the logo for it right there.
All right.
But so I did that for about 3 years. We ran some huge events around. We ran all of the digital media for the league. We ran their website. We ran the fantasy league. We ran all their social media. We ran events at the games. We ran a big mascot program with 7 different mascots every week.
You kept sending photos from the sideline.
I know. Yeah.
Is it King Abdullah Stadium?
Yeah, there's King Abdullah. Yeah.
Oh, like 65,000. It's like double. Yeah. It's absolutely mad. Like it's just like here. Yeah, like everyone's crazy about it. Didn't you? Oh, yeah, they came over. Was it the Saudi Super Cup or something?
Yeah.
Cottage.
Yeah. Do you remember that? The first Saudi Super Cup, run the same way as Community Shield and so on, was held in London. Okay. The first one was at Fulham, as Jamie says, or was the first one at QPR. They did it for 2 years. Certainly, we went to the one at Fulham.
Yeah, it was in 16.
And it was amazing. I mean, it was basically Riyadh and Jeddah in West London. I mean, it was absolutely extraordinary. The place was packed out. Huge viewerships back in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it was exactly the same vibe, like identical vibe here. Yeah, it's actually it's quite lovely actually. Remember, didn't they do tons of deals for people to come over and be able to support the team?
Yeah, that's right. The travel agencies were doing packages to London for folk fans to come over and watch one of the their team playing in London. Of course, have a holiday in London while they're at it. But that was really an excellent initiative. That wasn't by us. We did some stuff around it. Mbaz actually advertised in that. What we did do though with Abdul Latif Jameel is we arranged big events in stadiums. I still haven't seen the like of them anywhere. I mean, for example, there's a company, a puppet company in Germany called Dundu. Dundu have 12-foot, 15-foot high puppets. And we had them playing football before the season finishing game, stuff like that.
And you did the virtual reality like stuff around the stadium, wasn't it?
Yeah, we did virtual reality. We did all kinds of different things. And the nice thing about a market like that is I think everybody's getting more and more familiar with Saudi Arabia and how it is modernizing extremely quickly. And it's football crazy. And football is very much at the cutting edge and the leading edge of a lot of things. A lot's been talked about, the expansion of women's rights, for example. Used to be that women couldn't go to the stadiums, which everybody sort of wasn't too happy about. Anyway, that was all relaxed about 18 months ago. So you've got a family section, as it's called, and the guys section. In other words, the rowdy section and the not quite so rowdy section. But yeah, so running the title sponsorship of the league was fabulous. It got me into places you otherwise wouldn't get to. You got to meet people you otherwise wouldn't get to meet. A couple of the people I got to meet on a fairly regular basis during that period, Howard Webb and then Mark Clattenburg, were running the referees, how do you call it? Anyway, I'll call it this referees improvement program, whatever it's actually called. But I mean, great guys, really, really good guys. I know Mark doesn't necessarily get a positive press wherever he goes, but I like them both. Both extremely professional, very knowledgeable. And because we were basically the only Brits in football in Saudi Arabia, we'd have a coffee or a 7-Up together whenever they were in town, because I was based very much in Jeddah in those days. So yeah, fun days. My time with Abdul Latif Jameel came to an end at the end of last year. All through that time, I was allowed by Abdul Latif Jameel to continue working with Mbuzz in my spare time, as long as there was no conflict of interest. And there never was a conflict of interest, because ALJ's focus on football was very much domestic within Saudi Arabia. And one example being what Mbuzz did with Sheffield United. Their focus was outside of Saudi Arabia, so there was really no conflict at all. So at the beginning of this year, I joined Mbuzz full-time as head of Mbuzz Sport, working closely with Yusuf Abdullawi, who's the vice chairman of the company, and he works closely with Nawaf Al-Shamri. Nawaf's the chairman of the company. So it's a relatively small operation, but punching above its weight, and very much focused on international opportunities. So
I'll get on to more about MBuzz shortly, but actually, you're also senior advisor for the Saudi Cricket Council and the Saudi Rowing Federation. You talked to me about to what your roles entail for that.
Well, the rowing's easier, I think. So I was asked about 3-4 years ago by the head of Saudi Arabia's biggest sponsorship business called Seller Sport, lovely man called Rakan Al-Harthi. Rakan asked me, he knew of Jamie and Rory being heavily into rowing. And he said, what would it take to get a Saudi rower to the Olympics? And I said, I have no idea, because I don't know what talent there is. And at that point, domestically, there was probably only one athlete. And then there were 3 or 4 other athletes who were rowing in the UK or rowing in the US. But Jamie's elder brother Rory and I put together a plan. It was like a 5-year plan. Everything from where they could row, how they would train, how they would identify talent, and so on. And we took that to various people at the Saudi Olympic Committee, and it was very well received. But then people changed, and then finally, and only about 6 or 8 months ago, a Saudi Rowing Federation was finally set up. One of the athletes that we'd been talking to, and we'd met at the British University's regatta, in fact. Right? Yeah, no, he was made president. So I'm in regular contact with him. The athletes train overseas. There's a lightweight lady who trains in New York State. The other athletes largely train over at Dorney near Eton here. Bill Barry, who's a very senior and well-respected coach, looks after them. So all in all, that's coming together nicely, but that's very embryonic. Contrast, cricket, believe it or not. Cricket is the second largest practice sport in Saudi Arabia. There's over 10,000 registered players. And by registered, I mean playing in leagues, playing in uniforms, sponsorship, the whole thing. But it's amateur sport gone crazy. Almost all the players are from the Indian subcontinent. Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, some Sri Lankans. And it's extremely well run. And we're right now transitioning from an amateur-based council, which nevertheless would select the national team. The national team, by the way, is ranked 23rd in the world out of 100 and something countries who play cricket.
It's not even that bad.
No, absolutely. And that's just been made a formal federation with Prince Saud as their president. So that's being professionalized, I suppose, in the true sense of the word, at 100 miles an hour. Yeah, in all my spare time, I assist on that as well. The Saudi Cricket Council has been run magnificently by an expatriate Indian guy called Nadeem Nadwi. And Nadeem has just done an incredible job, basically taking from nowhere, as I say, to 23rd in the world on a shoestring, and with magnificent help all over the kingdom. So yeah, I enjoy those because I mean nowadays, of course, we tag my advisory under MBuzz Sport. And what that means is for MBuzz Sport, it's not all football, and it's not all big numbers. You know, we also take pride in helping move tier two sports forward in the kingdom, because you know you'll all be aware of the big international sporting events that are now happening in Saudi Arabia. You know, Joshua Ruiz, for example, which I went to, which was an unbelievable experience. But Formula E, the first two races of Formula E are there. Big show jumping events. You name the sport right now, and Saudi Arabia is bringing the world to Saudi Arabia to see what's different about it and how it's changed and changing. So for us, it's not all football. Football's the main focus, but it's not all football. And cricket and rowing get us into, again, some interesting places and meeting some interesting people.
So now I want to move on to how you became a director at Sutton United. So first question, how did that all come about?
Well, Jamie was involved as well.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we had been, MBuzz this was, we had been talking to a League Two club for an extended period of time, because the company had been involved in sponsorships for itself, seen how that worked, sponsorships for other companies. For example, when Leganés got promoted into La Liga about 2 or 3 years ago, Leganés is a suburb of Madrid, and they'd never been in La Liga. It's a bit like Brentford making it into the Premier League. And they had, with 2 weeks to go.
Brentford in Bournemouth.
No, I meant Brentford because it's in London.
Oh,
it's like London versus Madrid.
When they get the
Who?
Brentford.
Well, they haven't.
Oh, right. I thought you were naming like a historical example. I was like, wait, what?
I said it would be like
Brentford. Right.
But
I was like, when did that happen?
Apologies to any closet Brentford fans if I've got the stats wrong. But anyway, where was I going?
Small team.
Yeah. So Leganés. So 2 weeks before, thank you. 2 weeks before the season, they hadn't got a shirt sponsor. So Yusuf did a magnificent deal to buy the shirt sponsorship and the perimeter advertising rights and so on. But we had nobody to sell it to. And the season was about to begin. So the beginning, again, you'll see some photographs on our website. The beginning of the season, MBuzz Sport was on the shirt of Leganés. And one of the first games in the season was Barcelona. So you've got MBuzz Sport, and here's Messi, and here's Neymar in those days, and then Suarez. And we had a meeting in Dubai to discuss where we went from there, because it was difficult trying to sell a whole season. And I said, look, we're playing Real Madrid in the Bernabeu soon, so we better not have our own name on the shirt, even if we sell it for one game. And of course, the history was that we bought the Sheffield United shirt for the Wembley semi. Even if we only sell it for one game, that's going to bring back a high percentage of the money we paid out. So the table looked at me as if I was half mad, and then said, "Well, what do you have in mind?" I said, "Royal Jordanian Airlines." And they said, "Well, why is that?" And I said, "Well, I've just flown Royal Jordanian Airlines, and they fly to Madrid. So there's a good outport marketing idea there." Secondarily, you've got Real Madrid sponsored by Emirates, and you've got Barcelona, who were then sponsored by Qatar Airways. So you've got a small regional airline, literally able to play on the same playing field as the big guys. So Yusuf and the lady who was running the business on a day-to-day basis at the time flew to Amman in Jordan, met with Royal Jordanian Airlines, and they really liked the idea. And rather than just buy the Real Madrid game, they bought the whole season. So it was a sort of A to B via Z kind of strategy. But the thing was that it was really a rifle shot. I mean, we weren't pitching that out to lots and lots of different companies, at least not to my knowledge. But it was just getting the right company for solid marketing reasons onto that shirt and into that environment. So yeah, they really did well out of that. So we'd had those sort of experiences, and Nawaf and Yusuf were starting to think about investing in clubs. And as I say, we've been talking to a League Two club for some time. We really liked them. They really liked us for a variety of reasons. It couldn't happen after a long period of discussion. And so Nawaf turned to me and said, well, what do you think now? And I said, Sutton United. And he said, firstly, who are Sutton United? Secondly, why? And of course, this was the year, 2 years ago, when we were flying high. If we weren't top, we were second. If we weren't second, we were third. Then we were back to top again. And I just had an idea, and I'll explain my connection with Sutton in a minute.
Yeah.
I just had an idea that if this continued through to the transfer window, the first thing that was going to happen to Sutton United was that the League One and League Two clubs were going to raid the top 4 or 5 players, and we'd end up 10th. And so I think I sent an email to Bruce and Dave Fairbrother, and said, you know, we're Embos, you don't know me. I was born in St. Helier Hospital, and you know, I've followed Sutton at arm's length for many years now, and would you like to talk about, you know, possibly some money? So Jamie and I drove up to Solihull Moors away in November of that season, and it was fabulous.
It was a rainy day.
It was a rainy
I remember.
day. It was great. It was a horrible day. Sutton didn't play particularly well, but came away how many?
Still banged out 2-0.
2-0 win. 2-0 away win.
Dundo banged in the second one.
Did he?
Yeah.
And so the 4 of us met in the corner of the stadium, and you know, I went through what I've just mentioned, and Bruce and Dave said, well, you know, we don't take outside you know, money, outside investment. We're a community club, always have been, always will be, and stuff. I said, well, you know, our idea is we're not takeover merchants. Our idea would be to buy some shares, put a war chest together that will give Doz in those days, of course, give Doz a war chest such that come January the 1st, he can start to repel borders and suitors for our top players. So anyway, the bottom line is Dave and David Mathers came over to Madrid, and we met in a hotel in Madrid with Nawaf and Yusuf and myself. And ultimately, it was deemed to be a good idea. And the war chest was created, and we didn't lose one player in that January. And everybody knows we finished third and lost that bloody game to Boreham. Yeah. But let's not go there. But anyway, the strategy and the input there was I think very helpful in terms of continuing with the momentum that we had that year. So part of that was an invitation to me to come on the board. It made sense for me to do that because I was born in the borough. Pretty much always followed Sutton, not as closely as obviously the last 3 years, but certainly from a distance, I've always followed the results and seen how the club's been going on. So unfortunately, spoiler alert, neither of us have the encyclopedic knowledge of the club of some of the interviewees that you guys have. But nevertheless, I think as AB was saying when you interviewed him last week, you know, once you're into Sutton, somehow it gets under your skin, and that's definitively the case. So
I can't believe it's hit by a car.
I know, yeah. That was unbelievable. Right. So that's the connection. That's how we came to be involved. You know, when we get involved with clubs, we have a similar sort of minority involvement with a club in Spain. Yeah. And our goal is always to add value. Our goal is always to be actively involved, not passively involved. It's not just a matter of putting money in. We think that because we're looking at different countries, because we've got experience in different markets, we can bring experience and expertise that from outside. I'm not saying that's necessarily any better, but it's often different. And hopefully that can stimulate new thinking and new ideas and help move the clubs forward that we're involved with. So hopefully we've added some value over the last 2 or 3 years, and we'll do as much as we can to do that.
So obviously, with one of the most recent directors to join the board, when you came onto the board, how did you sort of feel coming into a club where obviously a lot of the board members have been at the club for a significant amount of time?
To be honest with you, I mean, you went through quite a lot of my career, so I'm fairly used to moving into established environments, and so to me it was very similar to that. Really received a very warm welcome. Really enjoyed the people that I met. What's interesting at the moment is, and I think a lot of the folks on this call may be following, the reports from the board that are going on the website and stuff. I mean, we're now meeting virtually every Tuesday evening. Now, normally the board would meet once a month, and I dial in, just as we're dialing in now from Jeddah or wherever I happen to be. So a little one removed, but always accommodated by the board, even though at the time we didn't have the world's best Wi-Fi connectivity in the boardroom, but that's changed somewhat. But this lockdown period, I know this isn't the question, but this lockdown period has really brought the board even closer together than it was before. And I think it was either Dave or Bruce said the other week, the board right now is aware of talents and skills and expertise and experience, and we're using all of those. That because of the nature of the lockdown is bringing to the fore within the group of people, and how to get things done, who to get them done with, is really much more broadly spread right now amongst the board than perhaps it was in the past, simply because people's skill sets weren't necessarily known. So certainly from day one, I felt that really welcome, actually. Whether that's because I was born, in the borough, or because things had gone pretty well for the club after we provided that war chest, or helped. Let's call it helped with that war chest. I don't know, but certainly from day one, I mean, I felt very warmly welcome, and continue to do so.
Can you sort of tell me the games you've been to, and how is there any like standout games you've been to, and how much have you enjoyed watching the team in recent years?
Well, yeah, I mean, I go as often as I can. I think probably the most exciting and game that I've watched was
Christmas.
Yeah, was the Yeovil game.
The 4-3.
4-3, 3-2, something
3-2.
like that. I mean,
3-2.
Absolutely end to end. I mean, there was no pause for breath, and it was just a great. I think it was on TV as well. That was a great advertisement for non-league football, for National League football. I mean,
yeah, I was up there. They're great.
Yeah, and of course, Yeovil had just come out of the Football League with a parachute payment, and they're decently paid players and so on. And Sutton again saw them off. So I think that's the one that really stands out. I mean, of course, televisually, it's got to be the cup run. In fact, Jamie and I warmed up for this by watching the cup run. So we watched the two Wimbledon games, the Leeds game and the Arsenal game, just before you dialed us. And I mean, those games, unbelievable. But the Arsenal one really was the beginning of my thinking that Sutton could be something that we could hopefully get into, if the board felt that was a good idea. And so picture this. So Sutton were playing Arsenal. Jeddah is 2 hours further on, so it's getting fairly late in the evening. And I am dashing around the streets of Jeddah, trying to find a restaurant, not any bars, of course, a restaurant or a coffee shop that's running the game. And I eventually find one about a mile from where my apartment is. And the game's just started, and it's this scuzzy restaurant. They've just redeveloped it, actually. This scuzzy restaurant with a number of Egyptians in there and Syrians, and they're really quite into this. And of course, what they're really interested in is Arsenal Football Club, and they've never heard of Sutton United. But by the end of it, they'd certainly heard of Sutton United. And we gave as good as we got in many ways. When who was it? Rory hit the bar.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I thought, this is it. And so I'm jumping up and down, but with me jumping up and down, the Egyptians and the Syrians were getting quite excited as well. So that is my it's the biggest game in everybody's memory. I think a couple of the folks who've been on the interview have said that the Leeds game was bigger, because who would ever have thought that Sutton United would beat Leeds? And I think probably that is a bigger game. But certainly what stands out more in my memory...
That wasn't offside, by the way.
Yes, that wasn't offside. Because as I say, dashing around Jeddah to try and find a TV that's showing it will always stick out in my memory. But yeah, that's probably the one. But certainly in terms of the amount of games, I get to as many as I can. I say I'm not back in the country that often, so I'll try and get over as much as I can. Yeovil certainly this season was a big one, but the atmosphere on the last game, the Hartlepool game, right, was quite unusual because
that was when the leagues had been postponed.
Yeah.
Everyone went to the conference. Yeah.
I know. I mean, but it was like everybody was kind of. It was almost like everybody was skiving off from school or something. I don't know. I mean, there was quite a unique atmosphere about it, because we're the only ones who's doing this, along with 4 or 5 other games going on simultaneously. So that one will always stand out as just being, an absolute turning point in world history. I mean, what we're living through now is nothing short of a changing point in world history. Way beyond football, of course. I mean, I won't get into any cliches about that, but it is. So yeah.
Can you sort of give me an insight into what happens in the board meetings?
No. Dave chairs them extremely well. There's a formal agenda. There's rarely a voting process, except for Player of the Year and stuff like that, because the as you quite rightly point out, I mean, the board has been together for a long, long time. The board is made up, as AB was saying in his interview, of fans of the club. And so everybody around that table has only one thing in mind: what is best for this football club? And so there's never a raised voice. There's never a split vote, or there's rarely even a vote. And it's a very together group of people. It runs extremely efficiently. It's extremely caring. It cares about the fans big time. It cares about the players big time. And it cares about the community possibly more than anything. The idea that right now we've got 3 disability teams, all of whom are champions, 2 women's teams, I think back-to-back promotions for the ladies' first team, 7 girls' teams. I haven't even got into boys. I mean, this is massive outreach into the local community, and that is what is at the heart of everybody around that table, I believe.
So where do you think Sutton United Football Club can get to in the future?
Well, you asked the same question as AB, and well, I think you've asked the same question. You guys have asked the same question of everybody, but I completely subscribe to everything that AB said on the topic. If ever you are satisfied with where you're at, you simply won't progress. We talked earlier about Leo Burnett. Leo Burnett used to have, I think still does on the formal side of things, a logo which was a hand reaching for the stars. And that was something that Leo himself once said, which is when you reach for the stars, you may not always get one, but you won't come up with a handful of mud either. And that's kind of, I think, the way that we are at Sutton. Nobody, we've done all the hard work in many ways, or a lot of the hard work in dragging ourselves back up out of the Isthmian League, and to be a regular contender now in the conference, in the National League. And what's next? What's next is the league. And, lots of talk about, when we were flying high, very high, let's say, 2 seasons ago, the amount of board discussion about every aspect of compliance with league regulations if we were to go up. And we had to have all of those plans, all of that thinking, all of those costings, all of those provisions in place before, in order that if we qualified, we could go straight up. And certainly, again, I subscribe to what AB was saying. I hope that in my time on the board with Sutton United, that we're playing league football at Gander Green Lane. It would be absolutely awesome,
still on
Jamie.
a 5G pitch.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious major questions about the pitch and so on, but who knows? Who knows what's going to come out of this whole COVID-19 situation? I mean, Bruce was saying he doesn't believe that football's going to be the same after this. I agree with him.
Yeah.
And who knows if rules are going to change regarding pitches and so on.
Well, you know what? If anything, hopefully it stops this kind of endless spiral of, like this transfer prices just going up and up and up and up and up and up, and it's in this absolute never-ending cycle where it's like if it keeps going at the rate it is at the moment, like football's going to become unaffordable for 90% of football clubs. It's just utterly ridiculous. So hopefully, because of economy's taken a slowdown a little bit in this situation, maybe it kind of resets the balance a little bit with football being able to be affordable again.
Definitely.
So, I hope so, at least.
You think about close to where we're at right now. If it turns out, and it's a big if, of course, if it turns out there are some kind of playoffs, and if Harrogate Town are one of the clubs to go up, are the Football League really going to turn around to them and say, in this environment where everybody's strapped for cash, our rules say that you cannot go into the league even though you deserve it, or even though they would deserve it, if they were in that position, and you're going to have to rip that pitch up and put a grass pitch down.
I can be cynical.
Well, cynicism may well be right, but that's a sort of question that may arise either this year or a year later, because finances may not be too different a year later. So I think Bruce is right. Football, I think some fundamentals or some regulations or some rules or the overall economy of it, as Jamie says, are going to change, and potentially for the better.
I think so.
I'm going to talk just a bit more about MBuzz now. So, what sort of ambitions do MBuzz have in the near future?
As a company?
Yeah.
Right, but so, MBuzz or MBuzz Sport? Let's just talk about MBuzz.
MBuzz, both actually. Let's get into both.
Okay. MBuzz, the parent company, is a telco services company. So if you think about EE and Vodafone and O2 and those guys, there's a raft of different companies that sit right beneath them and provide services and engineering and all kinds of business services to those major network operators. And that is where MBuzz sits. So in Saudi Arabia, our main customers are the 3 biggest networks, which are called Zain, STC. You might be familiar with STC, having seen them, Man U and Real Madrid, for example, short for Saudi Telecom. And Mobile is the third one. Increasingly, though, MBuzz is an international company. And we have a European organization called, surprisingly, MBuzz Europe. It's based in Dublin. It's run by a Frenchman. And one of the earliest pieces of business that they did was putting some mobile switches into Surrey University, not very far from the club. So MBuzz Europe is gathering momentum, but the business itself generally does large projects. So Our Muslim colleagues on the call will be obviously more aware than anybody of Mecca and Medina. In order to get to those two holy cities, you fly into Jeddah. Jeddah is building, in the final stages of building, a new airport to take, I think it's the 14 million pilgrims alone that fly into Jeddah in a year. And MBuzz is mobile enabling the entire new airport. So that's the biggest project that the parent company is doing right now, but there are other important projects that it's working on. MBuzz Sport, as you know, we have investments and involvements in Sutton and a club in Spain. They play in Segunda B, which is the third level in Segunda B in Spanish football. What we're looking to do over time is to build up minority investments in 5, possibly 6 different countries in Europe. We have our eye on Sweden, we have our eye on Switzerland, we have our eye on Portugal, we have our eye on France. And why those? Well, those are the countries that are providing, when you think about it, a lot of players to the bigger leagues, a lot of coaches to the bigger leagues. So they're really extremely fertile countries for the rest of Europe and the rest of world football, if you like. So that's why we're involved in those countries. They're also not big countries necessarily from a footballing point of view. But as soon as you think about Switzerland, for example, that the Swiss Super League only has 10 teams in it, and 3 of those go into Europe. So if you
Still not that big, right?
I know, but yeah. But it used to be 40% until last year. It was the top 4 clubs went in, 2 into the Champions League and 2 into the Europa League. Now it's 3, I think, because the Swiss national team has slipped down FIFA's ranking.
Is that how it's done?
But right now, top 3 clubs going to Europe. So if you're involved with one of the Swiss clubs and who are in the top tier or who get into the top tier, you've got a 30% chance of going into Europe the following year. So that's when the sort of business side of football starts to click in, and you think, okay, well, why would I do something more expensive in a more established market? And the answer is you wouldn't. So the other point about that is that when we're involved with clubs, what we try and do is cross-fertilize best practice, opportunities to play, friendlies against clubs in other countries where there's a mutual interest, if you like, player transfers. Certainly, the beginning of the season, I was talking to Matt about players in and players out, possibly, to the Spanish club that we're involved with. None of them came off, but certainly there was an amount of dialogue about that. And again, that's something that we hope to do, is just open doors that otherwise you might not think about, or you might just, it would be, just wouldn't have the contacts for example. So that's our goal on the investment side. We want to do some more sponsorship deals, not for ourselves, but for clients like Royal Jordanian, for example, where it's not chairman's choice getting into sponsorships. It's more a marketing-based approach. We may get back into the advertising side of the business, certainly events. We have the expertise in the company to run major events around sport now, and I think we'd like to get into that. So there's a number of different avenues. We don't have an army of people, so we need to be careful about what projects we're working on and which ones we think are right for the business. But also, it's people. A cliche that I use around here is people do business with people they like to do business with. And if there isn't a marriage of the minds, then it just isn't going to, sooner or later, it's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. And I remember, when Jamie and I first met Bruce and Dave at Solihull Moors, we go back in the car. These are just really, really nice.
Good lads.
Whether anything comes out of this or not, I've really enjoyed the day, and I've really enjoyed meeting these 2 gentlemen. And you only have one chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
And if you go and meet somebody from a club in wherever, and you come out of the meeting and I didn't feel right. I remember talking to one club in Spain who were in desperate financial trouble, and it wasn't the sort of thing we would normally do. but there were reasons as to why we were exploring it, and they filled this room with people. The owner slash chairman was I'm not naming any names, was oh dear heavens, I mean, talk about rubbing people up the wrong way. And Yusuf and I walked out and said, why would we ever get involved with this club?
I was like, nope.
So getting the relationships right, and working with people who you get on with and who get on with you, absolutely key. And that's not always easy across countries, of course, and then across cultures. Our team is very multinational. You've got an idea about my movements and stuff. Yusuf, our vice chairman, is Moroccan by birth. Worked with Nokia in Finland for many years. His wife is Finnish. They live in Canada. Nawaf, Saudi, educated in Saudi Arabia and Leicester. So people in our team move around between cultures and between countries fairly easily and fairly readily, and enjoy doing so. So that's why there's very much an international view on where the business needs to go. And as I say, on the investment side, we aim to have a number more minority involvements. And then on the sponsorship side, on the event side, it really depends what comes along. So yeah.
I've asked you about obviously where you think Sutton can get to, what ambitions MBuzz have. I just want to go back to Saudi Arabia. How do you see sport going in there? And you've also it also looks likely that the Saudi PIF might be buying an 8% stake in Newcastle. That just shows that Saudi are here to stay in sport, and they just want to grow further and further.
Well, I think that's right. One of the announcements that really hasn't gotten too much international press coverage is the fact that the government's just announced a multi-billion privatization program for the top 4 clubs in Saudi Arabia. The clubs right now are probably what you'd call associations rather than businesses, and they tend to have patronage of one member of the royal family or another. Largely, this is the reason why you don't see Saudi players outside of Saudi Arabia, because they're well looked after domestically, and the owners and of the different clubs want to keep the best players within the kingdom. So privatization of the clubs in Saudi Arabia has been talked about for an awfully long time. But if there's a major announcement from the Ministry of Sport that's going to happen, then I'm quite convinced that'll happen. Especially as you point out, Tom, the whole country and part of its foreign policy is definitively around sport, which is part of what they call Vision 2030. So. That's definitely a major move forward. You'll see more big sporting events in the kingdom. Already we've seen in the press talk about a Formula One race in Riyadh. I'd be very surprised if that didn't happen, because of course there's a race in Abu Dhabi, there's a race in Bahrain, which are very close. So again, with a limitation on the budget of Formula One that looks like it's going to happen, then there are economies of scale in doing 3 races in one part of the world rather than just 2, and then flying the circus on to Asia or wherever it might be. So you'll see more of that. Joshua Fury has been mooted as going back to Saudi Arabia. People say, well, it can't possibly be in Saudi Arabia. There's already been one world championship fight in Saudi Arabia. Well, actually, before that, there was Grove Smith, which I went to. Which again, I mean, those events are unbelievable. Those are the first 2 professional boxing matches I've ever been to, and the atmosphere was just electric. Apparently, it didn't come over that way on TV, but it was genuinely something to witness and be there for. And at the end of the day, boxing has always been about who pays the most money. Yeah. I mean, the Thriller in Manila and the Rumble in the Jungle back in the day. Those weren't exactly in Madison Square Garden or Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, true.
So I think you'll see more of that in the kingdom. Newcastle. Yeah, I mean, I think that's been touted around for a long time. We all know the story about Newcastle. Fact of the matter is, if what you believe in the newspapers is correct, 300 million for an established Premier League football club with a fervent fan base and the opportunity to build, 300 million is not a huge amount of money to pay. And in the world of Premier League football, when you think about the amount of money that comes in every year from TV rights. Now, whether that's going to change, of course, as we were discussing earlier, is anybody's guess. But if you look at what Ashley, again, what we read in the newspapers was asking just a couple of months ago, which is 450, you're talking about a 33% reduction in a couple of months. Now, that's obviously driven by the economy. Mr. Ashley's businesses are largely retail, which is going to have been hit hard. So, this is all market making. And if there's an opportunity to get 300 mil for a club, and if it's in his interest to do so, then it looks like it'll happen. Certainly, Sheffield United, of course, now being wholly owned by Prince Abdullah. So there's already a Saudi involvement in the Premier League, and they've been punching above their weight magnificently. So
they've been doing great, isn't they?
Who's to say that Newcastle cannot rise to the same heights or even more? I mean, it'd be interesting to see.
Go back to the glory days. I used to be.
Oh yeah.
Because they're a huge club. Like 15 years ago, they were up there with Man U, and like it was, Chelsea was mad. Especially James's Park is a big stadium, and there is a huge fan base following it. There's no reason why they, with the right backing, shouldn't be up there. So I think they've done a very, very good job there, to be honest.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens to them in a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually to give the team I support where I'm a Newcastle fan, so I got to witness those glory days. So yeah, it'd be great if they could come back. So
it was a good question.
yeah. So that'd be very interesting. Also, Newcastle, Sutton are both my clubs. Actually, I'm going to ask you one last question, Martin, before I move on to Jamie's rowing career now. Do you think there'll be any links with Sutton and Saudi Arabia down the line? Maybe like a pre-season friendly, whenever that will be. Do you think that's something maybe that could be looked into?
I would absolutely love to do that. And we've mooted that. We've mooted pre-season friendlies with the Spanish club and a couple of other clubs that we have in mind. The issue, of course, is money. And we're not rolling around in cash. And, coming out of COVID, I'm not quite sure that too many clubs are going to be. So it's a lovely idea. We'd love to do it. We'd almost certainly need a sponsor in order to do it. What the sponsorship market's going to look like as we come out of this situation, nobody really knows, except that it ain't going to be as vibrant as it was before. I think that's virtually guaranteed. But where there's a will, there's a way. And as we talked earlier about Leganés and Royal Jordanian, if it really makes sense, if something really makes sense for a sponsor, then they'll do it. But it has to be worthwhile, and it has to be a return on investment, and it has to fit with whatever their planning is, whatever their expansion plans are. So finding the right link between a club who we might want to play a friendly with, or who might want to play a friendly with us, and South London, that's the key thing for making a marriage, and therefore getting a sponsorship deal off the ground. So. Honestly, particularly in the present circumstances, it'll depend on some third party money, I would say. But is it impossible? No. Is there a desire to do that? Absolutely. I mean, I think Matt and the players would love to go play in Spain or Sweden or somewhere else. But at the end of the day, it all revolves around the money and how the money's spent. So.
Brilliant. Well, Martin, it's been absolute pleasure chatting to you this evening. Covered some fantastic topics, and I've really enjoyed it. So now, next on to you, Jamie, about your fantastic rowing career so far. So, what I want to start up with you on that is just generally, how did you get interested in rowing?
Well, I mean, as Dad was saying, like me and my bro were pretty heavily into hockey. back in the day. I think I remember the first. I mean, we always used to watch like the boat race and stuff on TV. But then the first time, I think I probably got into it because of my brother, and he started coxing at Abingdon because the cox is like the person who steers the boat, and kind of makes all the calls basically. And essentially, sorry, I started following him and going to some of the events with the fam and stuff, and I thought, hang on, this is actually kind of cool, and I think so basically I gave it a try and worked at it and started to get all right, and so basically I think because of Rory, I started rowing and fell in love with it.
So can you talk to me about the early competitions that you're involved in?
Yeah, yeah. I remember I think one of the first ones I did was at Ball Cup. It was a 1K at Dorney Lake where the London Olympics was held, and no one. It was like this kind of like big competition, but when you're J13, like everything seems big.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was I think I got a silver medal there, but there were like 4 crews that were there. But as it's kind of funny and sweet when you think about it. But definitely the big ones when you're at school were Nat schools, national schools, and Henley. Henley Royal Regatta is one of the big kind of summer events and stuff, and that's always been the holy grail for for schools to win. But there's this thing called the triple, which you can win, which is basically winning School's Head, which is the big head race on the Tideway in London that happens every year in March. So in the rowing season, you start with head races, which is like time trial, like one after the other, line astern, and then as you go into the regatta season, it gets into like 6-lane racing on side-by-side racing. So yeah, the triple is School's Head, which is in March, the head race, and then it's National Schools, which is 6-lane, and then there's Henley Royal Regatta, which is 1-on-1 in the boons down in Henley, and because Henley is basically kind of deemed the domestic world championships. Okay. It's basically like the Champions League of rowing, and it's pretty cool. And there's no other event like it in the world. I mean, it's we got 100,000 people lined on the riverbank, and it's like rowing in a stadium. And it's probably the only thing bar the Olympic Games that is anything near football in Rome, which is kind of cool. But we at school, so I kind of worked up through the years, and I was a kind of little chubby kid when I started, and fortunately I had stubbornness on my side, so I kind of worked at it through the years and got better and better, and just kind of everything started happening. I think there came a point when I think I was in 16. I had to choose between rowing and hockey because everyone has 2 sports and normally you got to choose one. And I think I got to the point where I was basically only playing the games, the hockey games at Reading, and with Berkshire, because I just didn't have the time to do both. And I was like, right, well, there's something a bit more racing sports, were kind of my gig. And I do miss hockey a lot, to be fair. I mean, it's football with a stick, but it's there's something about that kind of primeval thrill of racing a bit, which is gave me a bit more of a kick. So I decided to go with rowing. So worked up through school, got into the the first, because normally at school and in rowing, like the 8 is the main. That's the blue ribbon event that everyone wants to be in. So each like school and main club has an 8, and you want to get in the first 8. So I was in the first 8 for my J17 and J18 years, and by J18 we started to do all right, and we won School's Head. Unfortunately, we threw away Nat Schools. We had screwed up our race strategy a bit, and let Eton through. But then we kind of banded together really hard and absolutely smashed it for 5 weeks and managed to go and win Henley. So we did 2 out of the triple. But the first win at Henley was pretty special, and it was the first time the school had won in over a decade. So the scenes were quite big, and it was kind of awesome. I think especially with like rowing, having I think Abingdon brought a kind of a footbally atmosphere to it with all the stuff into it, yeah, which is kind of fun. Because Abingdon's got quite a passionate following just from old boys, from school and stuff. And yeah, there's definitely a real heated tribal vibe about it, which was pretty cool. So when we won, it was pretty huge. So yeah, and that's that year I was doing quite well. I'd kind of gone from a kind of pretty decent J16 to ended up being the top stroke sider in the juniors in the space of 2 years. So in rowing, there's sweep rowing, which is with 8s, and there's which is basically with 1 oar on either side, and then there's sculling, which is like when you've got 2 oars coming in and out. So at juniors, I was sweeping with 1 oar, and managed to, with my pairs partner Felix. We were doing all right, and we'd won all the trials and stuff. So I was actually doing all right then. We went to Junior Worlds that year in 2011, and that was my first ever Worlds best. So that was pretty cool. We got a silver medal in the 8 that year, and then the coaches at GB wanted me to go lightweight. So then started the wonderful diet and never-ending shred. So basically for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been a lightweight. So I was actually 80 kilos at school, but they wanted me to be a lightweight, and lightweights race at 70 in the summer. And I was like, oh God, okay. So basically had to hit it pretty hard. But I'm down there at the moment. So at the moment, lightweights live at 75 kilos, through the winter.
Okay.
So it's a bit more chill. And then we basically obviously go on weight management strategies and come down to weight by April, May, kind of. But it's kind of, let's say, unhealthy to live at 70, especially as normally the best lighties aren't designed to, if you know what I mean. Because you want to carry more muscle, and the more muscle you have means you're going to weigh heavier. So you kind of, no one who's got the most power is naturally 70 kilos, unless you're a physiological freak and have got lungs like crazy. So we tend to live a bit higher throughout the year so we can train well and eat a bit more. And then we come down. But I think, over the last 7 years, definitely, it's the same with everyone. You certainly don't have all the answers when you start learning how to weigh in, but you find what works for you and what gets the best performance. And, each year you kind of get a bit better with it and figure it out a bit more. I just kind of, ended up going from strength to strength, really. Started doing I got my first under 23 vest in 2013. Then 2014 was in the lightweight 4, and we got a silver medal. And then 2015 was in the lightweight quad, and we got a silver medal. So the 4 is with 1 oar, and then we swapped disciplines next year, and then did sculling with 2 oars, which is a quad. And and then got a silver medal there too. So it was pretty good period.
So that's not with the school, that's with Great Britain. So the medals that Jamie was talking about were World Championships at junior and then under 23 level.
Aye. Yeah, and you just you have lots of trials processes throughout the whole year, and you obviously got to win your races and win seat races and stuff. And it went well. I mean, and 2014 was so I was back at Brookes, Oxford Brookes, where I'm still finishing off my degree with my brother, and we won Henley together with Brookes with the first day, which is pretty cool, to be honest. That was the first time that Brookes had won in eons. That was winning a big one with your bro is pretty wicked. So that 2014 was a good year. But I think 2015 was the kind of that time for under 23s was when we were starting to get an eye on the senior squad stuff. So we got invited after we got a silver medal at under 23s. The performance director basically invited us to go to senior world champs as the senior lightweight quad. And so we did, and went to this beautiful place in France called Aigues-Belette, and it's basically like a nature reserve, and they only race on. They only put the boys out for a couple of months every year, and it's like azure blue water. It's pretty special. And that was our first senior worlds best. Came fourth, got in the A final, which was pretty good in the overall sphere of things. Well, obviously we'd love to have a bit more, but we had to be fair, we didn't have the best running. One of our guys, Steve, had some interesting weigh-in methods where he would basically use like bath salts to to extract a bit more food from him, like the night
I
before.
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it was mental. I still don't know to this day how he is alive. But yeah, let's just say that wasn't particularly healthy, and it got the job done. But he was basically in a coma after the final at under 23s.
Not literally.
But it was 30. It wasn't great. It was 36 degrees when we had our final in 2015. It was in Plovdiv in Bulgaria, and it was so hot. And as a lightweight, when you have to manage fluid levels and weighing in and stuff, that was tough. I had to be helped out the boat that day. I wasn't the best either. But yeah, basically that knocked Steve back really hard. So we ended up there were points where we were rowing in a triple. We couldn't even take the whole quad out because Steve had to be on such a reduced program just to stay healthy. But we still got there, and we did pretty good. But and then by that point, I was officially invited the next year to come to train full time with the senior squad and to go at it for Rio. And unfortunately, didn't quite make it for Rio. But yeah, definitely that's kind of set me up completely full time in the senior squad at Cav. In 2017, I needed to. Sorry, Caversham is the national training centre where we train. It's basically a 2K lake, and just do all our training there basically. But yeah, so in 17, sorry, I needed to go back and at least complete a little bit more of my degree. So I spent majority of the season back at Brooks, which is his Cav can be quite intense sometimes. It was actually quite nice just to be able to get out of the hothouse for a minute. And but yeah, came back, and a weird opportunity arose because after Rio, obviously, no one on the call will know, but they cut the lightweight 4 that year from the Olympic program, which basically meant that lightweights seats were cut by 75%. For going to the Olympics. So it essentially meant that only the lightweight double remained, so with 2 oars. So basically every single lightweight, even if they enjoyed sweep, had to go to change discipline and go to sculling. And not only that, there were only 2 seats available. So the lightweight double, which is now the only Olympic event, is absolutely mental. I mean, because essentially it's every single country's best 2 lightweights beating each other to death. And it's intense. It's become the deepest and most highest quality field, by a mile. But that's what happens when you cover 4. So now it's become extremely competitive to not only get into the boat, but then when you get into the boat, racing. And for the last 4 years, it's just been going through the roof because each country is kind of where in the past you've been able to choose between 2 events, and so it's all right to kind of spread the talent out. There's no, you can't do that anymore. So basically, every country's gotten a hell of a lot better. And times that that we've been doing that would have been competitive and been in the A final any year in the last 10 years. Now it's just not. It's just not good enough. So no, it's been certainly a learning curve for the last 4 years, but. There have been a lot of really strong moments. So Sam and I, Sam is my doubles partner right now. We ended up being in the double together, like kind of off the bat in 2017, because we had to. Some of the guys, the top 2 guys at the time, got injured, and so they basically brought in everyone who was behind that and said, right, we're going to race off for the double. So they took us to the last World Cup. In Lucerne. Basically, the World Cups are like there's 3 like kind of middle of the season races called World Cups, and it's a bit weird. And then there's the European Championships, and then the World Championships at the end of the year. So the last World Cup is always in Lucerne, in Switzerland, which is absolutely, again, just one of the coolest places I have ever been. If I could not recommend going there on holiday, it's beyond beautiful. It's under Mount Pilatus. It's like on the lakefront. It's unbelievable. And yeah, it's every year like Lucerne's the favorite location for everyone to go to. But so Sam and I were put up together against some other guys from the squad, and we won. We ended up winning the B final, I think, there, which for a scratch double wasn't too bad. And so yeah, we ended up kind of suddenly getting into the top boat in 2017, and on a whim. So we went into Worlds, did pretty well, and then the last couple of years it's been a little bit kind of up and downy, just with having to figure out a lot of things. But Sam and I are back in the double together, and yeah, we're going really strong. We finally actually now able to get some good time in the boat, and obviously with this whole just because of a couple of issues that were going on and stuff, we weren't able to qualify the boat last year because it was only the top 7 that qualified, and it's just, I mean, it's just ridiculous compared to what it used to be. I mean, it used to be 11 lightweight doubles and 9 lightweight fours, and now it's 7 lightweight doubles and no lightweight fours. So yeah, it's manic. But so you got to, there's no point doing it if you ain't gonna do it well.
Yeah.
So if there's no way that you don't want to just go to make up the numbers. And we're certainly in a position now where, because of everything that's happened, that it gives me and Sam a little bit more time. And whilst it sucks, with not being able to race and anything, in many ways it may well be a blessing in disguise for us, because at the moment there is basically, so we over 2,000 meters, lightweight doubles typically take about 6 minutes and 10 seconds ish. At the moment, there is pretty much, when everyone's at their best, which there is maybe 2.5 seconds separating the top 18 boats. And it is utterly mental. And having to bin yourself like pretty much every race, when you got other events where you can kind of paddle through the heat. It's just, yeah, it's certainly not for the faint-hearted. But yeah, no, and it's been going really well, and maybe now, because we got a bit more time, Sam and I can really properly gel together and find that extra 1%, because Sam and I become very, very close a lot of times together. We were all the World Cups we've done, like we came 5th in the time trial in the last World Cup last season. So no, there's been a lot of moments where and we've always raced unprepared, basically, and underprepared. So there's definitely a lot of upside, and let's go and do it. We got a year, not a couple of months, so we've got some real good time to gel down properly, find out what works best for us, and if we've been doing what we've been doing, with not being able to fire on all cylinders, what can we do now? So the only way up.
Brilliant stuff. Can I just ask what a typical training regime is for a rower, just to give the viewers a bit more insight?
Basically, we train 6 days a week. We maybe get Sunday off. Most days we train 3 times a day. I mean, rowing is one of the few kind of absolute endurance exhaustion sports out there. So it requires a lot of volume.
Yeah.
So we do basically an hour. We have normally 2 volume sessions in a day and then 1 weight session. For us lighties, we do a bit more cardio because obviously the nature of our weight management, we can't do as much weights, otherwise we won't be able to make weight. But Monday is normally a long aerobic session, and then the second session is a shorter, maybe a bit more intense aerobic session than a weight session. We normally have pieces at certain points, intensity pieces at certain points during the week. But yeah, it's getting to Reading at 7:30 in the morning, so you have to get up pretty early every day, and we're normally done by about 4. So training, definitely in terms of times of actual training, we're training about 7 hours a day, and I can certainly say through the winter months it gets pretty bleak.
Yeah.
So rainy old England, being out there in the wind and the rain, it's not particularly pleasant sometimes. Yeah. But certainly with the nature of the sport it is, you certainly not here if you're not able to crack on. But yeah, it's pretty brutal, especially as a lightweight when you can't eat as much. You're pretty on the limit with fatigue and quite often. So it's certainly tough, but it makes you certainly makes you on it.
This is one of the reasons that it's taken Jamie so long to finish his degree, because if you're training that many hours a day.
Yeah.
And it's 6 days a week. It's every morning and most of the afternoon. There aren't that many modules that you can take that can fit around that. So he's basically, since he went into the senior squad, he's been edging towards his degree in environmental science. Yeah. So again, there's some complications arising from the, which we won't go into here, but there are some complications arising from the fact that the Olympics has been postponed, because it means an extra year where he's got to edge forward rather than say, okay, the Olympics has happened. I was there, or hopefully not, wasn't there. But either way, they'll be training right the way through to that. And the idea has always been to take the immediate year after that and finish his degree at Brooks. But obviously, with the postponement in the Olympics because of Corona, then it's essentially become a 5-year program, not a 4-year program, to get the Olympic Games. So that's going to push his degree back. So obviously, we're talking to the authorities at Brooks to see how we can address that. But
because especially with the amount of time, and for me, I found every year that I've been at uni, I've had to weight manage hard from January through to the summer, so like semester 2, and it is extremely difficult to do work and to think when you got no calories, because it's brain food as well. Like, your brain needs fuel, and I find I'm working at 11 p.m. at night, so your productivity is so slow, and especially right now, with what we're trying to do, like it's too tight at the top, so there's no way that I could do 3 modules a semester right now. There's just no way. We've got to leave no stone unturned in the next 12 months, and if we do, then there's going to be something extremely exceptional at the end of the line. But that isn't going to come from falling between stools trying to rushedly finish off a degree.
Definitely.
So, but yeah, no, it's going well then. It's certainly. I think when I've been able to just do one, each year, so one module, at least I can actually focus on it. And I think I've actually been getting better results because of it. So yeah.
So the feeling you'll get if you get to the Olympic Games, that just must be one of the, since you started rowing, that just, if you can get to the Olympic Games, that would be obviously the biggest achievement so far, and obviously the motivation you're going to have now to get to the Olympic Games is going to be sky high. So obviously this is a really important time coming up.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely. Like, it's something I've always wanted to do. I mean, since I was 13, and it's been I said half my life now. but yeah, no, like I think I was saying to Dad the other day, like, I don't want to go to make up the numbers, and I think Sam and I have had a bit of a chat. We're like, because of the time scale that we had, the objective was to qualify, and to see how high is up. But now, I mean, knowing how tight, because the thing about lighty rowing is 70 kilos to an extent is the great equalizer. Like it's so tight at the top that if you make if you make good improvements and you make some good speed gains, you can jump a lot of places, you can leapfrog a lot of people. And at the moment, we know that we have the capacity to medal if we have the time. And now we have the time. So we're like, all right, do we want to, reposition our sights a little bit on what we want to do here? Like, because I think if your mentality is that going is enough, you'll never go. Like as Dad was saying, reach for the stars, you won't come up with a handful of dirt. But it's true. Like you've always got to ask yourself for more, and then the rest will take care of itself. But, if that's enough, it just won't happen. So no, we're really gonna get the bit between our teeth and absolutely stick the hammer down with training and stuff. Like there's no reason we can't do it. And if someone's got to qualify, so and it might as well be us.
Brilliant stuff. I've just got a couple of questions actually in the live chat from James King. Actually, first, this links back to football. So this question for both of you. In your opinion, what is the best way to get young people interested and invested in local non-league football as opposed to naturally becoming armchair Premier League fans?
Great question. That is a great question. Love it. Have you got an immediate answer? No. Well, I can tell you my own story. and that may
Playing soccer in Chicago.
well, yeah. But so we moved. My family moved from Sutton when I was 2. My dad was working in the paper industry, and he was promoted, and he got a job in Manchester. So you won't hear it in my accent, but I grew up in the outskirts of Manchester. My sister, our kid, still lives there, and I grew up, I wanted to be a professional footballer. I wanted to be a professional cricketer. Everybody wanted to do those things. But I ended up getting the 48 bus to Old Trafford to watch Man United. And this is when I was sort of 12 and 13. But there was no way that my mum and dad were going to let me to go to away games. So what was I going to do on a Saturday when Man U were playing away? And the answer was Altrincham Football Club, where I heard AB himself has been. And so I grew up watching Man United one week and Altrincham the next week. And we lived very close to Altrincham. My mum had a stageware business that was actually on the road that led to Moss Lane. Oh, sorry, was Moss Lane, but led to Altringham's ground. And Altrincham then, as very similar to Sutton. I mean, I actually believe, and I may be wrong, but I don't think so. Altrincham and Sutton are the 2 winningest non-league sides in terms of FA Cup of all time. And I remember one of my earliest, I don't know how I was allowed to do this, but one of my earliest memories of Altringham's success was getting to the 3rd round of the Cup. And it was away at Wolves. And so here's little Altrincham, going away to Wolverhampton Wanderers. And I was on a bus with the good and the great of Altrincham. And Alty lost 5-0. And the great Jackie Swindles didn't even score. I think Jackie Swindles one year scored 100 goals in the Cheshire League or something. I mean, phenomenal. But that there grew my love of non-league football, and it's continued ever since. And I'll still follow Man U's results. Our local club here is Wycombe Wanderers. And Jamie can probably wax lyrical about Wycombe, but we went to the FA Cup semi-final.
That was my first game.
And mine watching Wycombe, and everybody from around here went to the game, and that was against Liverpool. You may or may not remember.
Yeah, I remember that.
What, 2001?
01.
Yeah.
Boys.
So I mean, absolutely epic stuff. So we followed Wycombe ever since, mostly in League 2, now in League 1, of course.
It's real football.
It's real football.
There's less theatrics, and it's actually just more the love of the sport, I think. And
yeah.
I think, especially as you're saying, to prevent people from being armchair fans, I think if you've got a local club, support them. It's like there's no point in being, oh yeah, but I'm like, in London, it's like, oh, but I'm 12, miles away from Tottenham, but I'm like 2 miles away from Wimbledon, for example. It's kind of like, why not? There's so many like good clubs, and the purity of football, I think, it really does lie in the lower leagues, and it's actually more enjoyable, I find. Especially when there's always something quite nice about supporting the underdogs, I think, a little bit as well. Like, we went to watch Wycombe against Tottenham in the FA Cup back in 2017, and still, like, it's just seeing the boys, like that opportunity to be able to, go toe to toe with them, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. And the cup brings that out, to be fair, more than anything else.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I mean, lower league, lower football league, and non-league. I mean, I think I wrote this in an interview on the website or something. It is real football, and the fans in some ways get very distanced from the players, in the Premier League. I mean, plus, pretty much everybody you see in the lower leagues and non-league, you can identify with them. They're oftentimes local folks who've come up through the junior teams and so on, and it's just altogether much closer. But I think that the honest answer, as a marketing person, I'd be interested to hear AB's thoughts on this. But really is, even if you support one of the big Premier League teams, and most people do, there's still room in your life for your local team. And I remember we worked on a project in Qatar a number of years ago, and we had an assignment to build a fan base, a sustainable fan base for a club called Lechouia, and Lechouia were the top team, and they were still only getting something like 500, 600 people to the games.
Really?
But they had really top players in the side. One was a guy called SUFCtv, who was perennially the best player out of Tunisia, World Cups and all the rest of it. They had a top Korean player. They had Vladimir Weiss, who played for Man City. I mean, and they had a number of these guys, and we put together a strategy for energizing the expatriate communities around each of these players. So we literally marketed in Korean restaurants to Korean people to come and watch their guy. Likewise, the Tunisian community, big Tunisian community in Qatar, etc.
I think clubs being in touch with the community is the absolute biggest thing, I think.
But the slogan we had is Yalla Lechouia, which means let's go Lechouia, your local team. And it's local because I'm Slovakian and Vladimir's my guy. And it's kind of the same thinking, really, that everybody in the country will be close, and probably, as Jamie was saying, closer to a lower league or non-league team than the big team that they support. And the question, it comes down to marketing, is how to galvanize that. Sort of oversimplified. It obviously isn't, but anyway, great question, James. Thanks.
Yeah, another question from James. This is for you, Jamie, actually. Are you racing each other during lockdown using them smart rowing machines?
Well, funnily enough, that's not the smart rowing machines. Although, at the moment, I've basically got a watt bike, an ergo, like a Concept 2 rower, and a turbo in the garage at the moment. So, it's we still can get on the bikes and stuff. So cross training, because obviously cycling for aerobic endurance training is still a really good cross trainer for rowing. So we've still been able to get good stuff done, whilst we've been locked down. But there's funny, one of my my best mates is the stroke of the Belgian lightweight double called Niels van Zandweg, and who just because the other thing I was going to say about lightweight rowing is because obviously the four's been cut, it's quite a close knit family.
Gladiators.
Yeah, so everyone knows we're the best in our countries at what we do, and we're in the elite event, and it's become a little bit of a family on the international stage. But basically, we've set up this league, well, not league, but this little group of us on an app called Zwift, and I don't know if anyone knows about it, but it's a pretty well known interactive cycling kind of racing game. It's like a competitive game, and you can kind of level up, and it's got this kind of virtual map called Watopia, but you can also ride in London and New York, and it's got tons of routes. And basically, we on the international circuit, we've kind of set up races against each other. So we all kind of meet up online on on a Friday or whatever race is on. We kind of, because they have races every day and events every day. I don't know if you saw, Geraint Thomas basically did what was it, 14 hours straight in the saddle or something mad. But yeah, that was on Zwift, and all the pro teams basically have been using it as well during this period. And yeah, so because obviously lightweight rowers are probably more akin physiologically to cyclists, just because of what we do with weight management and stuff. So we all tend to be pretty good cyclists. So yeah, basically we all race each other on Zwift, and we go for rides together and stuff, and kind of FaceTime each other while we're training. So it's been kind of nice to be able to still have a bit of a competitive atmosphere, while we've been on lockdown, which is pretty great, because I think when you end up slogging yourself to death facing a garage wall, on the rowing machine, it's not particularly motivating. But yeah, so it's probably kind of cool to kind of lose yourself in the world of Zwift for a couple of hours and get some watts down. So we basically use Zwift a lot, so it's pretty cool.
I have a couple more questions for you, Jamie, actually on rowing. Who have been the most influential coaches for you?
Influential coaches, definitely my school coach, a guy called Athol Hundermark. He's South African, and I've probably never had someone as a coach who's more emotionally invested in it with you. He taught me a lot in terms of my racing mentality, and the way that high attack races basically. And yeah, he was pretty inspirational. He knew the right thing to say at the right time a lot when we were at school, and he was he was virtually the main reason why we won. You know, because basically when you win Enley, you are de facto the best school in the world. And it's it's kind of cool, and yeah, it was a huge achievement. But yeah, Hundy was really in there with us. You know, he was in the boat. He was our well, obviously Cox's ninth man, but he was the 10th man, as it were. He absolutely taught us how to win. And I think especially in sport, like people can compete. You know, like teams can compete, but there's certain teams that know how to win. And I think when you understand that and what you need to do, it definitely unlocks a lot of kind of a perspective on sport, really. And but yeah, in terms of speaking of mentality, I think role models, as it were, Michael Jordan to me, because I grew up in Chicago during. I don't know if you've have you been watching The Last Dance on Netflix?
Yeah.
Yeah, like because that the second three-peat, well, and the first three, it was literally when we were living in Chicago when I was growing up. So that's like my
Cool.
childhood. And MJ is like my absolute sporting guy. So read all his books and stuff, and yeah, just that mental graft and approach to what he did is awesome. And I think there's definitely watching him speak about those years again has certainly brought back a lot of like, oh yeah, that's why I think certain ways and stuff. It shows how impactful it was on my life. But yeah, I can't recommend that documentary enough. It's awesome.
Oh, you mentioned Lucerne and Switzerland are great countries to go to. Obviously, rowing it takes you to many different cool nations. Is there any other countries that really stood out to you that you really enjoy going to?
Well, I mean, we Australia was pretty cool. So basically, in 2013, they it was actually the last one that was run, I think, the Youth Olympic Games. It was basically the Australian Youth Olympic Festival. And yeah, we went to Penrith in Sydney, where the old, when 2000 was held.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely epic. That whole 2 weeks, it was like, I mean, it wasn't a holiday, obviously, but just the experiences and rowing on the Nepean River, which is like this. Well, basically where Australia have one of their main like training hubs, and it's this huge, it's quite wide, like really slow flowing river. But up at the top, you basically can go through this kind of little boydy rocky section, and you go into this valley, and you are rowing through like on 100-meter high walls on either side, and you got the sounds of the cicadas kind of bouncing off each other, and it was quite ethereal, really. It's like you're rowing an Avatar. It was awesome. Like I'll never forget that. So that place was pretty wicked. There's all France and Italy. They're kind of spoilt, really, with their lakes. It's absolutely unbelievable. There's a place called Lake Varese, which I would say is the second most beautiful place I've rowed behind Aiguebelette in France. It's just epic. You got the Dolomite Mountains in the background, and it's oh, sorry, no, Lucerne is the second most beautiful place. But but I mean, there's say Italy, Switzerland, France. I mean, like take your pick, and it's obviously you're there for business, but you do get to take in the sights a little bit, obviously in and around the competition, and it's like, yeah, this is all right. But I'd say the last few years they've definitely. I mean, we've always got Lucerne every year, but we've been to like Poland and Bulgaria and stuff. Quite kind of industrial courses, just the way that they are. But yeah, in terms of the scenic ones, Varese in Italy is epic.
The one most beautiful, not the most beautiful, but the one really beautiful regular location that you haven't rowed at is Bled in Slovenia.
Oh, Bled, yeah. There's this place in Bled. It's called Lake Bled.
Okay, cool.
And it's got this little island on it with a kind of chapel or church, like kind of cathedral-y type deal, and it's literally 2,050 meters long. And so the start line is literally in the city, like on the left, and so you've got people like jumping in a pool and stuff right next to you. So yeah, I've always wanted to race there, but I haven't been able to as of yet. But also a training location, not an actual race venue, but we go on this we go on an altitude, because altitude training camp, obviously, like with all endurance sports, is pretty good for boosting the performance. So we go up to this place called Silveretta, which is in the Austrian Alps, and it is unbelievable. You're basically between like kind of three peaks, and it's this one like 2,200 meter long kind of reservoir-y lake, which has got like kind of, it's like chalky blue water from all the mountain waterfalls running in around the side, and it's obviously glacial water, so it's freezing cold. We need to carry life jackets in the boat when we train there, because obviously if you go in it ain't great.
Yeah.
You'd hope that we've gotten to that point in our rowing careers where we aren't going to capsize on a training camp. But yeah, no, it takes your breath away. It's pretty wicked, and it's waking up every morning at, funnily enough, the Pisbuin Hotel, because it's in and around that area is basically where Pisbuin like sun cream was founded, because it was the guy was trekking. It was like, oh god. It's just absolutely stunning. It's kind of like, actually thinking about it, you just kind of, you're very tunnel vision, when you're training day to day, but then you take a step back and think about it. Oh yeah, it's some pretty lovely places we've been to.
Brilliant stuff. I thought that it'd be nice to finish off with some nice comments that Stuart Sharkey made on the live chat. He said, "Hi Tom, just to say it was really nice to hear from Martin and his son Jamie. I just want to welcome them to Sutton United. It's the first time I've met them tonight. They seem really nice people. It just shows people. It just shows people how it is only nice people on the board at the club, and it'd be really nice to meet them sometime down at the club." So I thought it'd be a really nice comment to finish off on. So thanks, Stuart, for that.
Thanks.
So so that concludes tonight's show. Martin, Jamie, absolute pleasure having you on. I've been really interested to hear about your stories and your careers, and I hope the viewers have thoroughly enjoyed it as well. And Martin, great job you're doing on the board, along with Jamie. And obviously, Jamie, I really hope you can get to the Olympics. It'd be great to see you in a Team GB rowing boat. It'd be fantastic.
Awesome. Cheers, Tom.
Cool.
Tom, thanks a lot. I mean, you've been a great interviewer, and kept us going and kept us lively. So thanks a lot.
No problem. We'll thoroughly enjoyed it. So real pleasure having you guys on tonight, and it'd be great to have you on some other time as well. And hopefully when this lockdown's all over, we'll see you back at Gangrene Lane with Sutton United winning games. So
yeah, see you there.
We'll be there, absolutely.
Excellent
Sooner
stuff.
rather than later.
Definitely. So thanks for coming on, guys, and have a good rest of the evening.
Good rest of the lockdown.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Cheers.
Have a good one, man.
You too. Bye.
Cheers. Bye, mate.
Bye. Well, that's it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that. As I said, I thoroughly did, and it was great to have that insight into the Sutton board. Obviously, Adrian Barry did a fantastic show the other night as well with Ahmed, and it's great to get more insight to the board. And I thought it'd be great to. It was great to talk about different sports as well, and obviously Jamie with his rowing, and Martin talking more about how sports grown in Saudi Arabia. So it was great insight, and it was really educational and thoroughly enjoyable to conduct that interview. So guys, check our socials out on Twitter for the shows coming up this week. We've got another great schedule. I think I'm interviewing Mickey Stevens next Sunday, so a week today. So definitely tune in for that one. There's more great shows which likes of Ahmed are doing, and obviously Connor with his. I think Greg's got a show coming up soon, and Connor's got his women's shows coming up. So lots of great content. So this is the place to be for you. Fantastic Sutton United content on YouTube. So. I've been your host, Thomas Mitchell. Have a good rest of the night with the hours remaining we got till the next day. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.